With 2025 coming to an end, I'm soldiering through some smaller horror features before we go to my top 10 of the year at the tail end of December. We begin with director Chris Stuckman's directorial debut, Shelby Oaks, with a screenplay he wrote. Stuckman is a role model for online film critic like myself. Besides amassing 2 million subscribers on his YouTube channel, he had gained traction with his reviews on websites like Letterboxd and now managed to make his own movie with Mike Flanagan as executive producer, and the film had been picked up by Neon for distribution. The story chronicled a group of YouTube paranormal investigation team who went to the ghost town of Shelby Oaks, where there was a creepy prison situated beside an equally eerie-looking abandoned amusement park. With the investigation well documented on tape, the team met a tragic end. Apart from Riley Brennan, whose body could not be found alongside her teammates, was first postulated to be missing, but many years later, Riley was assumed to be deceased. That was what everyone assumed, with the exception of her elder sister, Mia. One day, a strange man appeared at the doorsteps of Mia's house and committed the act of unaliving, sending poor Mia in total distraught, but managed to retrieve a piece of evidence to keep the hope of finding her missing sister alive. With the relationship with her husband strained from failure to conceive, Mia further alienated him with her unrelenting investigation of what had happened to Riley. It also brought Mia back to their childhood when Riley was prone to night terrors, and when Mia slept beside her and managed to pacify her hysterical sister, she saw an apparition that could be the cause of the unsettling terrors and linked to the recurring motif of a cracked window for the entirety of the movie. As she uncovered the layers of mystery with regards to Riley's disappearance in Shelby Oaks, including the notable cameo in the movie with Keith David's prison warden, Mia was stumbled into a spine-chilling prospect of an incubus, an ancient demonic entity at play, buoyed by a stellar performance from Canadian actress Camille Sullivan as Mia. Chris Stuckman skillfully created a mystery with a disturbing undertone, with Mia's late-night solo adventure to the creepy grounds of Shelby Oaks, interjected with a couple of heart-arresting jump scares in the prison cell. What transpired in the final act was unsettling to say the least, and the main thing that caught my attention and bothered me relentlessly was the copious amount of mold on the walls of the house. Despite great efforts in creating a decent paranormal investigation during the early days of social media went awry, and Mia's psychologically damaging adventures, I felt that the story was still very much lacking despite it was not a long movie per se. As audience, we have been told about Riley being maimed by the incubus since her childhood, but why did it take so long for what had happened to her in her adulthood? Of course, with the aim for reproduction, a prominent theme in the plot, it meant that kidnapping of Riley had to be happened when she came of age. This was still a decent effort from Stuckman in his directorial debut, and he showed on screen the best he could conjure up with the crowdfunding project for the movie at the starting phase. Shelby Oaks is a 7 out of 10, and we go to the next movie. Fans of Amazon's The Boys, do you remember Ashley, the irritating publicist of the Vault Company? Audience will remember actor Colby Minifie's unforgettable looks and her manic demeanor. Minifie will transpose the same maniacal performance to director Julian Mack's The Surrender as our protagonist Megan. Megan's father Robert was in the final stage of a debilitating cancer and bedridden with chronic pain. Barely managed by a cocktail of painkillers stringently administered by her mother Barbara, who trusted no one except an unknown confidant who had been inculcating her with holistic method to treat her husband of 40 years. From some crucial flashbacks, which also came into crucial part of the plot for Megan, we could see that Barbara was harboring some resentment on her only daughter and her husband with some decisions made that were contradictory. This harboring of resentment would build up to the present when Megan was struggling with her own life and seemingly left her parents for the bright lights of a big city despite knowing of her father's conditions. Of course, Robert did not make it due to an oversight, leading to Barbara making an absurd decision which horror fans would make a prediction on what had been chosen. This led the mother and daughter going through a crazy ordeal which put their own lives at risk in a terrifying realm that they barely got concept of, and by then, we the audience will realize what the title of the movie, The Surrendered, had implied. This is another strong directorial debut for Julia Max, who also wrote the movie. Perhaps it was more heartfelt through a female's perspective, with the mother and daughter relationship in which the overt doting by the father figure to his daughter could incur a bit of jealousy, yet it was more layered in the fractured relationship. It also helped that Kobe Minifie and Kate Burton in the role of Barbara were strong in their performances and played off each other very well. Minifie was at her manic best when the absurdity Barb had cranked up, while Burton played it so mellow yet was very manipulative. In the end, you couldn't help it but to wish for Megan to succeed, when she had been put through some visceral punishment, much like Dakota Fanning in Vicious. The flashback scenes threaded into the culmination of the resolution interestingly, and the relationship between the three characters came to play with sufficient weightage, as seeing an imaginary healthy version of her father consoling her and giving her advice can tug on your heartstrings. The image you see on the promotional poster was the interesting aspect of the surrender ritual, where Julia Max extract that part of their house where the ritual was held to the creepy realm where whatever can go wrong had gone wrong. Max also started the movie with a horrifying image to prepare the viewers with what was going to unravel for this supernatural presentation. As compared to Shelby Oaks, the story was more tightly written. Of course, the scope was more confined. It could be quite a dread sitting through a movie about dying loved ones, and the surviving family members did not even have time to mourn before hurling themselves into more harrowing situations. While I appreciated about not explaining the rituals and the scary manifestations in the movie, things were too open-ended in all aspects. I'm awarding The Surrender a 7 out of 10 as well. Vadakkan is an Indian Malayalam horror movie directed by Sajid A and written by Uni R. Rahman and Anna were renowned paranormal investigators who were making waves in some Scandinavian country, like we were in the middle of Stieg Larsson, the girl with a dragon tattoo. An old flame of Rahman came enlisting his help to solve the mystery behind her husband's tragic passing, which involved the production of a Big Brother-style reality TV show with a group of skeptical young people being put through some orchestrated supernatural events. This was your classic things went awry when your mischief turned into dreadful reality, and this was associated with a tragic lore that plagued that particular location. In actual fact, Vadakkan felt like 3 movies coerced into one film. The first part with Rahman, Anna, and his old flame Megha felt like a dramatic relationship tussles and unrequited love, much distance from a horror movie affair. Rahman, played by actor Kishore, looked like a less awkward Keegan-Michael Key, was definitely what I would not type as a sex symbol, but somehow the filmmakers had carved him out to be one. The second part of the movie which really dragged its feet was the reality TV show which Rahman and Anna had to go through to find out what actually went wrong, with the behind the scenes of the production and B-rolls, but really it did not amount to anything. The constant squabbling between the participants was distracting, and the visuals, whether it was the fake scares or when things got real and participants got hurt, were awfully shoddy. The final part with the law of the land, which was so nonchalantly laid out by one nondescript character when we could have digest what we have just watched for the past 2 hours for this crux of the plot, was actually interesting and held my interest and added some thread to our protagonist in the climax of the movie. There were stunning visuals spread throughout the movie and locations from India to Marvel at, but otherwise the movie was bloated and long, and the plot was paper thin despite the filmmakers' unabashed juicing of the movie. Vadakkan is a 6 out of 10 movie for me. Yes, my over-the-top Indon horror gore pairing of director Rizal Montavani and producer Rocky Saraya are back. Their latest offering is Take Me to Hell or Rego Nyowo. Young Lina left her hometown in Jakarta to Malang to join her older brother Ben-Hur in a boarding house owned by a friendly couple who managed with their son, who was around the age of the university students boarding there. From the onset, we knew that there was a sense of doom and gloom, and worse still, black magic at play, shrouding this rustic abode. With the boarding students, something was blatantly amiss with the owners. The hopping undead entity known as Pocong is a well-known supernatural threat that haunted Muslim populations in Southeast Asia and of course drew a lot of wonder from other ethnicity. Chong would play a key role in Rego Nyowo, being the devil-like entity that been summoned to help the boarding house proprietors who were seeking to bear children during their youth and had to pay the hefty price to ensure their wish come true and to continue repaying the favor. It felt like Lena, Ben-Hur and the housemates were used as pawns in a highly convoluted sacrificial ploy from the antagonists who needed to ensure they could appease the devil who had granted them that blasphemous wish. The stipulation the host family had to maintain itself was a bit shoddy and hard to keep up with. It just felt like this flimsy pact was always meant to not end well. It was apparent Saraya Montavani and scriptwriter Reham Juniati wanted to recreate their own version of a youthful cabin-in-the-wood style supernatural slasher feature. Something not unlike what we had seen in Until Dawn from this year. However, beside the sour siblings, the lookalikes in Bobby and Yamin, and the only other girl that had substantial screen time in Rina, the others did not amount to much and quickly dissipated from the screen as promptly as they had appeared. The collective acting performances were subpar, with Sadrina Michelle in the lead role of Lena, blatantly chosen for aesthetic reasons, and Dia Permatasari as Astri, the mother of the boarding house, giving a classic over-the-top antagonistic performance. It was a bit painful to endure. However, like the movie I had reviewed from the same production team in Haunted Apartment Miss K, I was smitten with the production value on display, with the rustic nature of the boarding house added gloss to the vibe of the movie, and the scares concocted with the devil creature was quite competent in small dosages. If you have a thing for unabashed in-dawn supernatural gore from Saraya and Montavani, perhaps Rego Nyowo can saturate your needs. Of course, even comparatively, this is bottom of the pile. The rating for the movie is a 5 out of 10. Cursed, or Sihir Pelakor, was based from a real-life travails of an Indonesian lady during her childhood when her father deserted her family for another woman who cast a black magic of vile essence. We were introduced to young Vita and a younger brother who were enjoying such a blissful life their doting father and mother had provided them. Her mother would be too preoccupied with work in her hair salon. Instead of reprimanding her, the husband actually encouraged her to focus on her career. This was before Vita made the heartbreaking discovery of her father's infidelity. That became the breaking point for young Vita, but to ensure she could paper over the cracks of the family falling apart, she kept mum of what she had seen, yet her father Eddie was bewitched by this newfound love affair. Not providing to her family was hard enough to the extent that Vita could not afford to take the examinations, while the Jezebel who orchestrated the black magic would steal the hair salon under the eyes of Eddie's ex-wife. She even resulted in bringing bodily harm to the children, as the evil entity that she had summoned had requested for blood. Sihir Pelakor was your typical homewrecker's tale of flagrant utility of the black magic or occult, which was not hard to procure in this part of the world. While a heartwarming ending was never guaranteed, as we have seen in Poison Sangha, a movie that would draw direct comparison with the homewrecker tag, as well as being based on real-life events, this storytelling and heinous antics unraveled on screen were more effectively done. Director Bobby Prasetyo, whose movie Kuasa Gelap in my inaugural Asian Trips feature, proved once again that he's a decent storyteller and did not resort to unnecessary gore or using attractive young actors. He did the human condition better than many of his contemporaries, but in terms of horror movie making, he lacked that bit of ability to creep out his audience. Seeing the real-life Vita pouring out all the tear-jerking memories in an intimate interview in the rolling credits, it felt like Sihir Pelakor stood out in the sea of run-of-the-mill in-dawn horror movies. This is a 7 out of 10 for me. From Indonesia to Malaysia, we have ParaXnormal from director Muhammad Suzana Rosli, about 4 childhood friends from the same village, or in Malaysia known as a Kampung. As the 4 childhood friends grew up and went on their separate ways, they led very different professional and private lives. Yasin will reunite with his buddies Asri, Anas and Fateh with a request to help him retrieve some sort of ill-fated windfall. This was pure comedic routine in an attempt to showcase the comedic chops of the various actors who may have gained some traction in Malaysian entertainment scene and with shtick that the local audience would appreciate. Therefore, this movie did not work for the global audience, despite I did have some light sniggers at sporadic instances. There was nothing paranormal to talk about in the storyline, but just focus on the superstitious nature of average Malaysian as a commentary. I felt this movie was a failed attempt to emulate the success of those charismatic Thai comedians from features like P-Mark. But as stated, this movie will cater more to the fans of these actors within the region. ParaXnormal is barely a tolerable 5 out of 10 for me. In Kampung Jabang, Mayot, Ritual Maut, we have an old village called Rangkas Puna, where there had been a practice of expecting mothers discarding their unwanted fetus on the land to harness the power of dark arts for personal gain. It was hard to perceive the storyline of Ritual Maut, which was based on the popular web story, to be a period feature, as the protagonist Weda would highlight the fact that she was born in the year 1966. Weda, a model who was supposed to base in Jakarta, found that she was pregnant unexpectedly and on suggestion by her photographer boyfriend Bagas, to go through a painless abortion in his village of the above-mentioned Rangkas Puna. From the prologue, we knew that the village is now sparsely populated and was ruled by the remorseless witch doctor Ni Ito, who will be the one supposed to help Weda with her predicaments. Weda will also encounter other suspicious people, including a sickly-looking boy Guna, whose fate would intertwine with Weda herself. In a plot filled with twists and turns, the abhorrent nature of human on show again, much scarier than whatever malevolent forces had been summoned by these evil shamans. Ritual Maut, directed by Vishnu Surya Pratama, was not a very captivating horror feature that Indonesia had to offer in the year of 2025. There was lack of a noteworthy folklore, nor stomach-churning gore, or any characters that captivated audience. Although Ursia Aurelia, the actress playing Weda, is very aesthetically pleasing, another key features of Indonesian horror. I do like the gigantic stone statue featured prominently in Rangkas Puna, and many of these icons of the dark arts had strong sense of sexual innuendo, plus the whole part of discarding fetus and offering pregnant women was so synonymous with the incredulous practices I had heard being carried out in mosques around Singapore, plus the whole concept of kuntilanak, also tied up with death during childbirth with immense grievance. Therefore, there was always something foreboding about giving life that in turn been used as sacrificial lambs for the dark arts. Kampung Jabang Mayot, Ritual Maut is another Indonesian horror offering available to watch on Netflix and is awarded merely a 5 out of 10. Posthouse is a Filipino horror feature about film editor Cyril, who was entrenched in an unhappy working environment for an advertising firm. He came from a family of filmmakers, including his grandfather, who had made a monumental local horror silent film, which was deemed lost in history, with restoration of the film hitting a gridlock with missing scenes as Cyril's own father had attempted to restore it. One day, Cyril's daughter Dee, who he had sent to study filmmaking overseas, returned, and with the idea of rejuvenating the family heirloom, which was the lost silent film, much to the reluctance of Cyril. Eventually, Bee's enthusiasm infected her old man, who had been harboring the desire to complete the movie, and when he had set his mind to it, he was unrelentless and was a madman on the prowl. However, this also unearthed the childhood nightmare he had with the scary visuals of the film he had a glimpse of when his own father had been mired in his own restoration ordeal, coming to life and scared him witless one night. Even in his adult life, Cyril would be haunted by what he had seen that fateful night. And through the reignited restoration process, it seems like the nightmare was not just a figment of his imagination. Directed by Nicola Red, Posthouse is probably the first Filipino horror with part Tagalog dialogue I am reviewing on this channel, and I like the ode to silent horror since the golden days of Nosferatu or the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And through the foreboding visuals of the film, the scary entity coming to life certainly was effective to scare me off my shoes. When the same entity starting to stalk the characters of the movie, the scare factor greatly was diluted. Actor Sid Lucero was an effective grumpy Filipino man in his 40s and could derive no fun in his life, being around the people he worked or interacted with. I think it might be better for him to be substantially spooked like he did in the movie. The movie was not going to be memorable per se, but going through 10 similar Indonesian horror with paper thin lore, I thought Posthouse with the whole concept of cursed film restoration was a breath of fresh air. This is a 6 out of 10. The Exit 8 is a 2023 adventure game developed by Kotake Create, a creepy walking simulator that was celebrated on virtual reality platforms like MetaQuest, purportedly based on the underpass of Kiyosumi Shirakawa Station. The game put the protagonist through the labyrinth of the underpass at the titular Exit 8, only allowing the player to escape the relentless repeat of the same location unless you can pick up the anomalies to allow you to proceed to the final Exit 8 stage of the game. The success of the game created a whole zeitgeist, and adding horror to an everyday occurrence like walking in the train station underpass, which could be your daily routine, was surely more unsettling to many than witnessing a cryptid in a strange location you will never visit or being abducted by an extraterrestrial creature. In 2025, renowned film producer Kawamura Genki adapted the game into a feature film with screenplay from himself and Hirase Kentaro, with former Arashi member Ninomiya Kazunari in the leading role. The trailer release showed Ninomiya walking in the sterile, white-tiled underpass to lead to exit number 8, where the strange, expressionless man would walk past him until he realized that he was stuck in a zone with continuous cycle of no exit. Actually, watching the movie 20 minutes in, when Ninomiya characters, who is known as the Lost Man, entered the same underpass for the third time, when he realized that he was foiled by the rules of the game, he just vented out in pure exasperation. I thought, how would Kawamura be able to use the movie to create a full-length feature film? With the movie broken into 3 chapters focusing on specific characters, I was thinking it would be an anthology horror movie of various victims of the Exit 8 entrapment. In the end, it was a bit of both, with Ninomiya as the center of the plot, with some key personal problem entwined in his own predicament in this mysterious wormhole, and he would require the help of someone who would be an important person in his life even before he knew it. I went into the movie knowing that the trailer would be the real selling point, and the movie was likely going to turn out into a dour affair, and I was not wrong for most of the movie. However, Kawamura and Hirase were able to spin some strange plot lines without explaining too much of the mystery of the game, and who was orchestrating the anomalies, as well as creating some memorable visuals for an otherwise very sterile feature which looked to be filmed at very low budget for most of the movie. The unsettling soundtrack from the producer of the girl group Perfume also added to the enjoyment of the movie. Let's see the Backrooms movie in slew for next year could outdo this predecessor with similar source material and cultural zeitgeist. I'm awarding Exit 8 a decent 7 out of 10. Ghost Train is a Korean horror anthology from director Tak Se-won. The movie looked into the urban legends surrounding a Gwanim station where people were reported to be missing, while some people had reported of multiple accounts of haunting. Dakyun, who was a professional YouTuber, was competing in her company to attain a level of fame and viewership with her channel, wanted to get exclusive content from the station master. Bribing the middle-aged station master with alcohol, Dakyun was able to get a story of an undergrad who had been mysteriously killed after being haunted by the ghost who had died in the exact location previously. The story did bring eyes to Dakyun's channel and attention from that dashing supervisor she had her eyes on, yet being antagonized by a colleague whose channel was mainly on cosmetics. Dakyun's frustrations in professional and personal life led her to visit the station master umpteen times, despite the utmost reluctance to entertain her from the station master, but we as audience would watch these skin-crawling tales the station master would tell Dakyun about this mysterious Gwanim station. Eventually, the story started to involve people around Dakyun and culminated in the climactic end with herself doing the forbidden for fame and affection from her supervisor. Going into the movie, I did not know that it was a horror anthology. Upon realizing it, I was bought into it. The first segment was quite enthralling for me, hearing tales of scary passenger or mysterious platforms from urban legends all over Asia. What transpired was certainly not foreign to me. The following segments did not disappoint as well, while throwing a shade on Horian's propensity for plastic surgery or the affluence of homeless or hobo lingering in this station, constantly looking for spare pennies lying around. With a screenplay from Joe Barian, Ghost Train was never going to be Exuma for 2025, and plot-wise could not even compare to a Revelation I reviewed earlier, but I had a good time with it, and this is 7.5 out of 10. From Seoul, South Korea, let's go to some Welsh forests with director Bryn Cheney's Rabbit Trap, which he wrote as well. Slumdog Millionaire star Dev Patel played Darcy, a sound engineer with a harrowing backstory, moved to the Welsh countryside with his wife Daphne, played by Rosie McGowan, to get away from the hustle and bustle of city life and build on his repertoire of nature sounds, while Daphne will work on her new experimental music. A mysterious child native to the land appeared during one of Darcy's sound recording sessions and would foster a friendship with the couple. There was little known of the child, even the name was not disclosed, although the child did tell them soppy stories about her brother and mother, as well as the mythical Tywith Tech, the fairy-like creatures that might be bad news if they were invited into your house, as the child had warned the couple. As Darcy and Daphne tried to grab a hold in their new life, as the wife was mending the fragile state of the husband, the habitual visits from the child grew from the intrigue of the folklore as well as the charm of the land to sheer irritation with the uninvited, becoming a guest who refused to go. The title Rabbit Trap came from the context when Darcy first met the child, with the latter warning of the presence of such trap laying in the land, which could symbolize with something less physical but more psychological or of mythical essence. Watching the movie, it felt like director Cheney had taken a leaf out of a Neil Gaiman's whimsical fantasy, which can be gut-wrenching as you peel the layers of the story. Perhaps now is not the best time to pay homage to the disgraced author. The movie is so succinctly British with the lore and the landscape, and there will always be a place in the horror scene every year for such movies like this, and Watchers from last year, or even Oddity or The Hole in the Ground in recent times. Patel, McGowan and Jake Crute, playing the nameless child, gave strong performances, especially the climactic end when relationships got very testy and abrasive. You just wonder what will happen to each of these characters. Rabbit Trap is a 7 out of 10 for me. Osgood Perkins' second feature film for 2025, Keeper, also felt like a dark fantasy with a foreboding lore that encapsulated its characters. Perkins' muse of late, Tatiana Maslany, was joined by one of the late Donald Sutherland's talented children, Rossif, playing a loving couple Liz and Malcolm respectively, celebrating their anniversary by having a weekend trip in a secluded cabin owned by Malcolm's wealthy family. The cabin was a charming place if you take away the fact that Liz would start seeing hallucinations around the place, including apparition on the frosted window of the shed across the cabin, or some hollow man scare when Liz was taking a skinny dip in the bath. None was more sus than a piece of cake that a mysterious caretaker of the cabin had baked, and Liz was cajoled to eat it by an overly eager Malcolm. To compound to the dreary mood that lingered in the air, Malcolm's obnoxious cousin Darren would crash the serenity with his social escorts, who felt like victims of human trafficking. The escort, who purportedly could not speak any English, would casually warn Liz about the suspicious-looking cake. Whether it was a piece of pastry to kill for or will get you killed, Liz would slowly be spooked in the space, especially when Malcolm, a doctor who constantly was on the call of duty, left her alone, and we started to realize that there were other inhabitants and they were baiting on Liz. The screenplay for Keeper was written by Nick Lappard, who also wrote Dangerous Animals for Sean Byrne this year. As changing bloodthirsty great white sharks for spooky supernatural entities, Lappard would keep the same concept of an evil man seizing control and captive of women for some selfish purpose. There will always be a fight in our imprisoned protagonist, and casting Maslany, who was always portraying strong female characters, was not without consideration. At the beginning, we talked about the dark fantasy or lore that formed the backstory of Keeper, but to me, the visuals Perkins had created felt more like an ode to Japanese yokai features with a western twist, while Sutherland played it subtle as a dashing, wealthy doctor without any air around him to let the guards of Liz and the audience down. Maslany gave an eye-catching performance in a horror movie in that very scene when she knew she was going to meet her doom in front of the man who had deceived her from the start. Maslany, as many claimed, was wasted in The Monkey and will be featured in Osgood Perkins' next film, The Young People, held the movie for the majority of it, which was otherwise a slow and ponderous film until the revelation and the climactic end. That was how the filmmakers used to sell the movie as 2025 scariest horror film when it was barely a quarter of the length of the movie. Nonetheless, Keeper is as polarizing as Longlegs or The Monkey, but showcased Perkins' ability to switch from a variety of source materials. Despite his penchant for the horror genre, the mood he created for all his movies was always on point and allowed viewers to be immersed in it. Keeper might not be a real keeper for horror genre for the year of 2025. It is still watchable and I'm awarding it a 7 out of 10. So there you have it, a quick rumbling of 12 films to wrap up horror films watching for the year of 2025. I had also caught up with Predator Badlands, but we'll do a special review episode with the 3 Predator movies Dan Trachtenberg had written and directed. There were also other movies like Argentine House Invasion Horror 1978, Ma, the Hindi mythological horror, the erotic thriller Bone Lake, British witch hunt flick The Soviet Sun, The Book of Sijin and Iljin from Indonesia, and the Filipino remake of Gongjam Haunted Asylum in Strange Frequencies Taiwan Killer Hospital, which I hope to pick up in due time for a review in this channel. It is gratifying to see the support for this channel, but I still hope more viewers can give it a try, so please help by liking and sharing it. There have been complaints about my accent and enunciation, which I tried my best to correct with every new review. Regardless, hope the subtitles will help. My previous review was the 11th edition of Asian Trips feature with Zhu Jialing's Hospital from Taiwan, Timo Stambol, The Elixir from Indonesia, and Tawawit Wantas, Attack 13 from Thailand. Coming to the end of 2025, which are your top 10 horror movies of the year? Stay tuned to find out what's mine.